Belli. I'm the Vice President of Yardi Systems Canadian Operations. And I've been asked to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Greg Romundt. Greg is the President and Founder of the Asset Manager and Property Manager and Centurion Property REIT, or Apartment REIT, I apologize. He has been engaged in investments in residential real estate since 1997 and investments in financial markets since 1991. He has a real estate investment experience in Singapore, Britain, Australia, China, and Canada. And I thought I traveled. But Greg, you've outdone me. In 1991 to 1997, he worked for Citibank in Toronto, New York, and Singapore as a financial derivatives trader in investment rate derivatives, major and emerging currencies, and exotic derivatives as well. From 1997 to 2001, he worked for IAG Investments Group in Hong Kong, Britain, and Singapore as the head of emerging market derivatives and then as senior vice president and partner emerging markets. Greg was a group risk manager overseeing all of the firm's positions in emerging markets and was a member of the risk management committee. He graduated from the Richard Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario with an honors BA in 1991. I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll start with just... Thanks very much. I'll just start with a little bit of an introduction of who we are. Today we're going to talk about lead tracking and conversion strategies for a portfolio. Centurion, which I run, is an Ontario-based apartment-only real estate investment trust, 22 buildings, about 1,418 suites. And we began lead and conversion tracking about 3.5 years ago using our own in-house developed tracking systems. So a couple of goals of this session. I'd like you first to understand what are the benefits of your data tracking or having an established system. Give you some tips and tricks to maximize your probability of success. I'm going to pull out lots of interesting charts and statistics so you can see what I'm talking about. And then we're going to develop a very simple system for tracking leads and conversions. So what are the benefits of having a good lead and conversion tracking system? Well, in all the presentations I've seen earlier today, the focus has been on generating leads and traffic. Well, you can generate all the leads and traffic in the world, but if you don't know where they're coming from and you don't do anything with them, you've wasted your money. So part of our goals, and certainly our goals when we set up our own systems, were first to significantly decrease our costs, to significantly increase the traffic to our buildings, and as a result generate more applications to rent, which as a result means you have better selection of tenants, lower bad debts, more demand for your units, which equals higher rents and total higher revenues, and lower overall vacancies, thus higher total revenues. This is what we did. So over the course of, I guess it was 15 months, we were able to cut our cost per lead by 95%. So if you can see from our starting point, I've used an index to normalize it to 100. See where we started, or our starting point, where we had a combination of web and print strategies. We began a lead tracking system, which I'll show you a little bit later in simple form, and what happened as we implemented the various stages. So we found out what wasn't working, eliminated it, found what was working, and increased it. So you can see at point 1, starting point, then we moved to the second point, which was, guess what? Cut out the print web, or print, and increased web. So we continue to see further decreases in overall costs as we improved our allocations in the third point. So at this point, we'd already found what worked. Then we started tweaking and playing with the systems and improved the allocation. So we continued to cut off what wasn't working. So we really went from a shotgun approach where we had a lot of different sources feeding in, then it continued to trim down. You can see then we kind of stabilized out, and then we started experimenting and playing with the system. And this is something we're always looking to do in our organization, is looking for new things. We trial them, they don't work, cut them out, move on. So acquisition cost per lead doesn't mean much if you can't do the same thing for your leases. And this is exactly the same pattern that we saw. So this gives you a very, and in this case, it was also about 94% total cut in cost per lead acquisition or lease acquisition. So this was a very significant number. In an organization for us, it ended up being a very, very large number that we were able to significantly trim from our budgets. So, and you can see the same points that I've illustrated that we saw in the earlier graph, and it followed exactly the same pattern. So, what are our lead tricks and tips? Number one, this is absolutely nothing less than a numbers game. You have to make it work for you. And as I've said earlier, generating all the leads in the world won't do anything for you unless you can convert those leads into application and into leases. So you want to target your highest, best quality tenants in the most cost-efficient way. So how do you do that? Well, first, know who your clients potentially are. How do they contact you? When do they contact you? Which leads are good quality and which leads are bad quality. And with a little bit of data analysis, and I'm going to show you that, you can find that out and target appropriately. So as I said, renting is a numbers game. So I'm going to take you through an idealized example. So we've separated our lease process into about 6 stages, which we monitor each stage and our success ratios in each independently. So the first is you want to get the call. Now I'm going to assume that you're going to get the call every single time. So we're not going to play with that number right now. Okay, so that assumes you're going to generate your leads. Now it's up to what do you do with it. So let's assume that your probability of getting a call is 100%. So I've got 2 columns here. The one on the left is the probability of that event occurring. And the second column is your cumulative probability. So as we continue to move through the stages, that lead funnel continues to get winnowed out. People are getting thrown to the side and moved out of the process. So we'll start at step 1. You're getting your calls. Your probability is 100%. Well, let's say that you have a success ratio of 75%. Well, now your cumulative probability is 75. Well, let's say only 75% of people who make appointments show up. So now you're down to 56%. Let's say a quarter make applications. Now you're down to 14%. 80% are approved, which is kind of where we are the numbers we see. And you're down to about 11%. If 95% of those people move in, you're down to 10.7% of all the leads that you generate become potential leases. So this means you need 9.36 calls for a single lease. So it's a little bit of a surprising number, but what's more of a surprise is what happens when we start tinkering around with these numbers. And so we can start focusing on what aspects of your business you need to focus in on to maximize the number of leases that you're going to write. So let's take 2 scenarios. So the first scenario is the one I went through before, which is kind of an idealized situation. Well, let's go to scenario 2. Assume you still get the call, and you make and your probability of an appointment goes down, let's say, from 75 to 50%. And let's just play with that number alone. So the number of leads that you require to close a lease jumps from 9.3 to 14. So very significant jump from just a very small change in your ratio. So the first thing that we pull out of this number is you've got to make sure that every time you get a lead that's a good quality one, you want to respond to it. And that means pick up the phone. And that's the number one thing that causes failure in any lead generation and conversion system is failure to pick up the phone. So scenario 3, we're gonna hit it even harder and say, let's now assume you've got a superintendent who's manning your buildings who doesn't pick up the phone or picks up the phone half of the time. And we have that same lazy superintendent he's a poor renter, he's only going to make 50% of the appointments. Well, even assuming that he's a half-decent renter, the same kind of statistics as all the other scenarios, you've now dropped to a cumulative probability of 3.5%. In other words, you need 28 leads to drop into your system to get a single lease. So we've gone up from an idealized situation of 9 to 28. So if there's any tip I could give you, it would be you can focus all you want on generating leads, and you can triple them or double them or do whatever. But if you don't do anything with them, you've just wasted all your money and all of your effort. So you got to know your clients when they call. Here are our statistics on when clients call. So you'll see something now. The off-flyer off to the left, those are outliers. But otherwise, the vast bulk of your calls come between the hours of 9 o'clock and 5. So those of you who are stressing about having to answer emails and phone calls, and that's what when we first set it up, I used to get concerned about emails coming in at 9 at night, and when did you have to reply to them? They come in on weekends, we cared. Now we don't. And you'll see why. So you'll notice, as was mentioned in an earlier conference, a good chunk of your calls are coming during the prime hours. When, guess where people are? They're at work. We'll see that here again. One of the, myths in this business is there's a traffic that occurs at certain times of the month. Here's the statistics on days of the month effects. And you notice it's fairly consistent across days of the month. So in other words, this means you can't just focus in the first week or the last week of the month. You have to be on your game all of the time. There's no time to relax. Well, there are, but we'll get to that. How far in advance are people calling? So, should you focus on, putting up your ads a week before they're due, 2 weeks before they're due, 3 weeks before you're due? Well, in this case, we have something like 90% of all leads are looking inside the span of 60 days. But on the other side, how many people are looking for your last minute? Well, you can see it's around 10% are looking for a week or less. So the vast majority of your tenants are looking inside the span of 2 weeks to 2 months out. And that's where you have to be focused on. And you probably don't want to be focused on those people who need an apartment now, and we all know the reason why. So what days of the week are your clients calling? This was something we spent a lot of time on. We operated at one stage 7 days a week on a call center basis. And we found that there was distinct patterns to when people wanted to call. So as Tuesdays are our best days, the traffic really starts to ramp up from the Saturday, Sunday, and then declines back into the weekend. But there's something that this doesn't really tell you the full story. The full story is when are people what is the quality of those calls by the day of the week? And this is the most shocking statistic that we had. This is conversion ratios by day of week. So you'll see that Mondays through Fridays, very, very stable, high rates of conversion. So in other words, people are calling on a Monday or a Wednesday, very, very likely they're going to make an appointment. For people who are calling on Saturdays and Sundays, and this was just a little bit of scuttlebutt that always went around, was a couple of property managers we used to discuss the advantages of taking appointments on weekends or advertising, spending money on advertisements over the weekend, and this is what we found. In fact, ads on weekends or phone calls received on weekends convert at 1/3 the rate of phone calls or emails that you get that come during the week. So that gives you an idea of when you should be staffing your offices to be taking phone calls. Now, what kind of gross lead conversion ratios should you be focusing on? Well, in this case, we have about 75% of all our leads get converted directly into appointments. The balance we have a very small proportion of no's, about 3% are no's. A very small amount is we need to follow up with them, or they get waitlisted, or we can't contact them. So you want to the whole point of this slide is to demonstrate that when a lead comes, you want to make use of them. Again, because if you're not managing your process, then a great deal of the money that you're going to spend is going to go to waste. It's important to know how leads contact you. So in our case, about 1/3 of leads come via the email and about 2/3 via phone. Okay, so, now out of that comes this. This is the conversion ratio and the quality of phone calls relative to emails. Phone calls are worth 3 emails. That's how much more. So of phone calls, we're able to convert 9 out of 10 phone calls into an appointment. 9 out of 10. Emails, it's about 1 in 3. So, one of the great weaknesses, a lot of the internet listing services, what we've ever found is there's not enough focus on getting phone calls and much more of the click to rent. And a lot of people think now, because of the web, people want to make use of the web to go and use to communicate with people via the emails. Well, the great downside of that is the leads that come via email are very, very weak. And that's shown in this chart. 85% of lead traffic that make an appointment originates via phone. In other words, 6 times, the quality of a lead via phone is 6 times more valuable in total than an email lead. Very important statistic and something you should focus on. Again, this re-emphasizes the most important thing, which is make sure whoever's answering the phone is picking the phone up. So let's summarize some of the tips and tricks. Number 1, phone calls are 5.8 times more valuable than emails. Every single day of the month counts. You can't afford to slack any day of the week or any day of the month. Saturdays and Sundays are only 1/3 as important as weekdays. 1/3. So you want to focus on where your best leads are coming from and get more of them. Sounds simple, and it is. Don't waste your time or your money on low quality or expensive leads. That's where you're going to waste a tremendous amount of time, because the vast majority of leads that come through are garbage. So you don't want to waste your time with them. And they're expensive. And lastly, but certainly not least, when the phone rings, answer it and book an appointment. And this is something that I think a lot of people forget, is that when somebody calls, a lot of the superintendents are untrained. And the biggest mistake that they make, assuming they pick up the phone, is they'll answer the question and then hang up the phone. And that's the absolute thing that you don't want to do. You want to have your superintendents or whoever's answering that phone pick it up every single time, be courteous, and book an appointment. So now we kind of have a sense of where our leads are coming from and who they are. We wanted to develop a strategy to improve the results that you're starting with. So we've got a 4-step reiterative process. First, we're going to determine our strategy, what it is we want to achieve, set a budget, let our program run for a little while, monitor our results, and then start over again and continue to reiterate. We always use in our system a continual experimentation process. So we're always looking for new services that come along, new ideas. We trial them. If they don't work, we move on. So I'm going to take you through step by step. So in strategy step 1, we're determining our strategy. So you have to decide what details of the lead do you want to track. Who's going to track this info, and what are your goals? Higher occupancy, better tenants, higher rents, the kind of things everybody wants. So lead-specific information. What do you want to track? Obvious things. Name, contact information. What do they want? Do they want a 1-bedroom? Do they want a 2-bedroom? You've got to understand, and this becomes more important as you build a larger portfolio. If you're a single building, maybe less of this is going to matter. But the larger your portfolio, more of this information builds into your database, which can become a very, very powerful tool. So what is it they want? 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. Maybe you have a few buildings that can satisfy their needs. Which buildings do they want to see? When do they want to move in? When would they like to see it? Again, push for the appointment. And diagnose why, if they didn't rent, If they did make an appointment, if not, why not? You absolutely want to understand. We're going to get a little bit later into how to analyze and optimize the 6-step process, and you can find out in your own organization where you're succeeding, where you're failing, so you can improve it. And lastly, and probably almost as important as anything else here, is how did they hear about you? Because you want to absolutely know every time where this lead heard about you, because you want to be able to score and thus optimize your process. Step 2, we're going to set our budget. So how much do you want to spend? So you got to pick a budget, determine what you want to start with, and adjust your budget to suit more or less your current lead flow. So this is a bit of in a reiterative process. You're going to start with whatever your budget may be of X, and then next time you're around are you getting enough leads for your process, and then you adjust your budget accordingly, up or down. And you want to allocate between your various sources on what you use now, and then later on what you learn. Number 3, you've got to let your program run for a while. So it's not about experimenting for a day or a week. You've got to let most of your programs run for probably on average about 3 months. And that's to give your enough time to collect enough clicks, to get enough statistics, and see how many conversions you get. And from there, then you'll be able to measure what was your cost per lead, what was your cost per lease, and is it worthwhile increasing or decreasing your budget on your next evaluation. And you only really want to make sure that you make changes to your systems after you've collected enough data. You don't have enough data, you can't make good decisions. You want to be monitoring your results. So measure what worked, what didn't work. Diagnose your problems, know what they are, and then know what adjustments, if any, you want to make to your process. So what do you want to measure? Really quite key, determining what it is you want to pull through and continue to monitor. So some of the things on the you'd like to start with anyway is the number of calls and emails that you get, your advertising cost per lease, and I'm going to show you how to calculate that, your advertising cost per lead, your conversion and success ratios by source, so you know because some sources convert at dramatically different rates, and different internet services convert at dramatically different rates. Some pull you traffic, but their lead quality is poor. So it's very important you understand not only that you're getting calls, but that the calls are good quality. You want to understand which medium, and I've kind of already given you that insight, which medium works and why, and by what step in your process. It's very important, as I showed you, you can go from an idealized world of roughly 1 in 9 being a lease to very quickly becoming you need 30 calls to sign a single lease. So that really gives you an idea that, if you quadrupled your lead traffic, most people think that would be pretty good, but you wouldn't see any results if as a result you let your performance at your building level and your step monitoring process deteriorate. So we use a very, very simple, well actually we use a little bit more sophisticated than this, but this is a very simple way to start. So you would just lay out a single chart, and you can actually print this presentation off and use this if you wanted to. You would track your different sources along your in the different columns, and then you would track, for example, number of calls that you got from that source, the number of emails. So the two of those together is total leads. That's D. So the total number of leads. Then you find out how many leases did you get, and how many dollars did you spend in your marketing period. So if we're going to analyze data, let's say over a 2-month window, and then we put the number of calls in that 2-month window, the number of emails, total leads, number of leases we signed, how much we spent, and now from those two numbers, or those series of numbers, we can calculate our cost per lead and our cost per lease. And then we can quickly look right across your spectrum, and if you had 5 leads, you'd have to put an extra column, or 5 sources, you'd have an extra column here, but you're very quickly going to be able to rank which leads, or which sources gave you the cheapest and most high volume leads. So this is very important because if you find that certain sources cost you 10 times what others do, well, guess what? You're going to cut them out right away. Right? They're cancers and you need to get them out. And others, you might find that your cost of conversion is ridiculously cheap, but you're not getting enough traffic. But chances are you won't cut it out if they're cheap. If it's cheap traffic, you might try and find a way that you're going to increase, maybe by a budget increase, putting more traffic towards those sources that are cheap on a per lead basis. Remember, let's go back to the idea that every lead that comes through a system has a cost. What you want to do is maximize the number of leads per dollar that you're going to spend. Once you've got a sense for where your traffic is coming from, what they cost, you're really going to want to make sure that your business process doesn't fail you at any step of the way. So I've highlighted 3 sections here because this is the ones that you can do the most about. So part 1, make sure you get the call. Sounds really, really simple, but it is remarkable how often, if you have your building superintendents, they don't pick up the phones. And if they only pick up half the time, you've lost half of your advertising budget. And just because someone didn't pick up a phone. Number 2, make sure that anyone who answers the phone makes an appointment every single time. There is no excuse not to book an appointment. I said, of phone calls from us, in our situation, we book 9 out of 10 phone calls becomes an appointment. And there's no reason to be anything less than that. It's not special training, not special systems. It just means when leads call, they're calling you for a reason. They're hot. And they want to see your property. It is your fault if they don't book it. Number 3, which is step 4, make sure your superintendents are reasonably well trained so that they're doing their job and making sure that they're going to increase the probability of a lease. They just throw open the door and say, here's the apartment, without making a sales pitch, you have very, very low probability. And, you know, targeting it even at 25%, that's pretty, I think it's a pretty fair and conservative number that most landlords should be able to achieve. You know, on the assumption that your product is the same as everybody else's and that a tenant is going to see 4 to 5 apartments. So if you just focus on these three numbers, and in our system we actually measure, you know, are we getting the calls? We know we are getting the calls. What are our booking ratios? And we watch our booking ratios on a month-to-month basis to make sure that they don't deteriorate. We want to do the same. And we want to know, are people making applications? And if they're not, you know something's wrong. And that's the power of using a system, is that if you know what your statistics are by building, you can very quickly diagnose what is wrong. So for example, if you're getting tons of traffic but no appointments, then, well, something's wrong, right? I mean, it might be that your superintendent is not bothering to ask for an appointment. It could be it's not got a very good phone manner. Maybe he's not answering the phone. So all those kind of things, you can drill down. You can, once you've got a system, you can track it very, very quickly what the problem is. Then once you know how many appointments you're getting, if you find out that your application ratio is bad, you got another piece of information. Maybe your superintendent doesn't know how to rent. You've got to address that. Maybe your product is mispriced. Maybe your quality is poor. So that's important for you to understand. And this is a very strong diagnostic tool that you can use to find out things that are wrong in your organization, the building, your superintendents, your staff, and you can fix it before it costs you real money. You can do things like this, which is, you know, a traffic by property analysis. So, you know, here we've rated traffic and indexed it. So you can see here's the average being 100, and at some sites will get 250% of average, while others are way down off to the right. Now, there can be a couple of reasons for that. Maybe you didn't have any vacancies, so you didn't advertise, so you didn't get a lot of traffic. Not a big deal. But if the buildings are being heavily advertised and are not getting a lot of traffic, or this might be, you could do the same chart for applications or leases or whatever whatever you find gives you insight into your business. But you're going to want to do something like this so that you know which buildings are working and why, and which buildings are not working and why, so you can fix it. So it's very important that when you're building a system, you understand where your system can fail and have adequate checks in place to make sure that you can fix them. So who is tracking your system information, and is it reliable? So, garbage in equals garbage out. Now, I'm going to give you an example here. We had a situation where we had a building that, we had a building in which we had a few vacancies, and a building that never had any vacancies. And we use a centralized call center, and so I called up the building manager and said, "What's going on? How come we've got so many vacancies? We never have vacancies." I get a call back after she's called the superintendent. "Well, we're not getting any phone calls." Okay, so I click into my system. I see, well, wait a minute. You've had 31 appointments in the last 2 weeks. You couldn't close one? So we knew immediately we had a superintendent issue. So the quality of the information that the superintendent was giving you was, guess what, a lie. So this again speaks to the power of knowing where, if the system information that you get is quality or not. And remember that sometimes superintendents or other actors in your systems don't tell you the truth. So you want to have something that keep the quality of your information flow good. Are your calls being answered? Number one flaw in almost any rental system is that calls aren't being answered. So you've got to make sure you do that. And are you booking appointments? Again, key. There is no excuse for less than 50% booking ratio. If you have anything less than that, then you're absolutely failing. Are your supers showing your units well? And what are your conversion ratios? You've got to be able to measure for you to be able to manage. So quality control throughout your process is absolutely key to success. There's a lot more. There's also some sophisticated strategies that you can get into once you get past the basics of any system. You're going to have multiple ads. You can do something called split testing, so you can see what ads work better than others on the same sites. You can do expanded data tracking for increased insight. You can monitor your success ratio. Some people don't go to this stage, but we do. This is something we watch very closely, where we're failing at each step, each site, or each step in our process by building. And you're going to want to use your data to audit your site staff to improve your rental performance. You may want to centralize your phone calls to improve the reliability of your business process. And you want to increase traffic to reduce your vacancies and increase your rents due to higher demand. I mean, this is one of the great benefits of generating lots of high quality leads, is that it's basic economics. Higher demand for your limited supply means higher prices and lower vacancies. So that kind of wraps up the core of the presentation.